Let's talk about SeaBees. Naval Construction Battalions, created in 19. I'd be very curious, and please do raise your hand just to ask a question, make a statement. You could wave your hand. You could preferably raise your electronic hand. Um, Naval Construction Battalions had been planned. I think my understanding is before Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor happened. There's a great understanding that we need these massive construction projects across the globe, anywhere where the Navy goes, anywhere the Marines go, especially. And I believe my memory is that after Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese took Wake Island, they also took some civilian contractors who were there as prisoners. And I think, boy, I should have done my homework for this program, but I think those civilian contractors they couldn't fight back legally, and because they weren't non-combatants, so they were taken prisoner. Anybody who resisted was killed, and I think that was really the impetus to really push through this program to train sailors, tradesmen to fight and build. And I think by the summer of 1942, there was at least one naval construction battalion stood up, and probably more than that even. Jim Jameson, you were not a CB, but your father was.
Yes,
And your father was wonderful, wasn't he? You had a great father.
very proud of him.
Yeah.
But he didn't talk about much about his service.
He really didn't.
We learned more after we got the records from St. Louis. Um, he said they hopscotched across the Pacific building runways.
How old was he when he joined the Seabees?
Let's see. He was born in 17 and he went in 43, so he'd have been what, 36?
And that was average for the Seabees. The Seabees were old. They were old.
Yeah, he was by profession, he was a surveyor all his life. He started his surveying career uh, immediately after their honeymoon in 1940 uh, with an opportunity at Duquesne Light. And he worked there till he retired in 1980. And he never really left the engineering and construction department. He was part of a survey crew. He became the surveyor for the crew. Then he became the chief surveyor. And ultimately, he had the survey corps and the draftsman that took all of the notes and reduced it down to plans for the engineering department.
And Seabees, because they had to have trades, especially the early battalions, they weren't training people up so much in the trades as recruiting tradesmen and then training them how to fight. I think the induction age for Seabees was like 50. And I think there were some people with really rare skills, older, much older than that, who were admitted to the Seabees and sent overseas. So your father at age 36, not unusual at all. This is his dog tag.
Yeah, that's one of two, and that's kind of another little tidbit of interest. That one is brass or gold, and I never knew that existed until sometime last year. Uh, my mother had given my brother some things, and my brother thought that I had the same quantity of things, and we didn't. Uh, my dad gave me an aluminum dog tag, uh, which you have a picture of, and it's similar, but it's not brass or it's gold color.
Hmm.
And I've never figured out why. Uh, the records that we got from St. Louis said he was in New Guinea and the Philippines, and he was trained as a machine gunner uh, never fired a shot, from what I can understand, other than his practice, to guard the end of runways that they were building as they leapfrogged across the Pacific.
Right. And I would love somebody if they know how to read a dog tag like this. I'm guessing this is his blood type O,
Yeah.
right? T.
Hmm.
I don't know what T would mean. This is probably the date of induction, 843,
I
United
don't know
States
what the T meant. Uh, I think they
Protestant,
were brought in
Protestant.
more as reservists as not,
Okay. And
but
here's one more. Oh, here's it. His patch, his CB patch.
yeah,
Ira said that the T is tuberculosis vaccine.
Is that what that is? Well, now why isn't his, okay, why isn't his religion on here?
I have no
Maybe,
idea.
maybe that came later.
I have no idea.
Okay. All right.
At that point in time, he was raised Presbyterian, and
How old were you, Jim, when he went overseas?
I was born in October of 42. I was pretty young,
So you were a baby, little baby.
and I didn't know who the man was that came home in 45.
Oh my gosh. So
Because my mother would tell the story. I ran from him.
isn't that something? Boy, oh boy.
And there
And
was
I'm
a book published by his battalion. Um, and my mother had it for years. And my brother thought I had it. He never asked. And when I told him I got the records, he started to look at it. And he said, "Well, do you have the book?" I says, "No." He said, "Did you throw the book out?" I says, "No, I wouldn't have thrown it out." But I says, "I don't know what happened to it. I assume our mother threw it out." But we have, thanks to Beth, we got a copy of it, and so we've got some history there.
so Jim, think about how hard that was on your father not seeing you for 2 years. And here he is writing a letter to you, who he hasn't seen in a long time, and he wouldn't see for another year and a half. And he writes this: Dear son, how are you, my son? It has been quite some time since your daddy has been at home or held you in his arms, but I'm sure that you are growing into a fine boy, growing big and stronger by the day. I know that you will listen to your fine and loving mother and do just what she wants you to do. And son, she will only ask you to do what is right. Does he know that you're like 2 years old? That what is right and also what is best for you at all times. So, Jimmy boy, you do what is right, and daddy will be home in the near future. In the meantime, your daddy will say a prayer each night for you. All my love, daddy. Oh my gosh, is that just
Yeah, and
tear up
the
my
other
heart?
interesting thing, it has a stamp.
Yep.
I thought a lot of the people that served in World War II, they signed their name and a portion of their
Right.
serial number, and it was postage free.
It,
But
it,
here we have evidence that wherever they were required to put a
yeah.
stamp on.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing.
Uh, and then the paper's kind of it's a blue cast paper on the other side.
Yeah.
So it's where that kind of paper came from. I think that might have been some old engineering paper that they had with the construction work they were doing, more like blueprint paper,
Yeah.
and they made paper out of it to write letters on. But I don't know that for a fact. After the war, he served in the reserves for a couple of years to a McKeesport uh, CB unit, and they did construction work in parks and Boy Scout camps and other more charitable things than where there was no work for the Navy.
Right. Barry Baker said the stamp is from California. Did the free postage only apply overseas like in Vietnam?
Yeah, but I think he was already overseas, unless he mailed it right before they
I
sailed.
think he was overseas. Yeah, that's right. Unless he mailed it. Do I see Rich Kimzelski here?
Yes.
Holy
I just, I just,
mackerel.
I just called him, Todd, and told him he better get on. So,
I didn't know he owned a computer.
well, it took me about a half hour to get him on, but anyway, I'll be
Larry,
quiet.
Larry, thank you so much if you recruited Rich. How you doing, Rich?
Oh, hanging in there. How you doing?
Good. I just want to introduce this is Rich Kimzelski, who I've known for quite a while, lives in Beaver County, comes to our in-person breakfast. I actually, when I was teaching the history of the Vietnam War, I love this. I had Rich's daughter in class. And so she was learning about the war that her father was involved in. And I just remember her as being so engaged with the class because it's like she's not just learning history, she's learning much more than that. Rich, how are you?
I'm hanging in there.
So you were a Navy Seabee.
Yes, I was.
How in the world did you end up in that unit?
I always wanted to be a CB. My dad's oldest brother was a CB, and I found out right before my mom's youngest brother was also a CB, right before he passed away. So that was always my thing to be a CB. I saw John Wayne in SeaBees.
Yes, the Fighting Seabees. I was
Yep.
just gonna say you must have, as a kid, seen that movie.
Yes, sir. And I wanted to go to the Marines, but when I was talking about, my mom said she would kill me. So me and a buddy of mine went up. He went to the fleet, and I went to the SeaBees.
It-
Actually, when I went in, I was a construction seaman. I was a CA. Everybody else was an SA, just for Navy seamen.
So when you were in boot camp, you were already designated as a construction
Yep.
seaman. Okay. But your basic training or your boot camp was exactly the same as everybody else.
Yes, yep.
And then what kind of training did you do after that?
Then I went to Port Hueneme for my A school training,
Okay.
which taught me I was an electrician.
And had you had any experience as an electrician beforehand?
Basically like home construction and electricity and that. I was an electrician in school.
Okay.
I took, 3 years of vocabulary electrician in school.
Right. So you go in, you get this education, you get the training in A school, and then how did you learn to fight? I mean, did you go to any kind of advanced?
A school, I went to Midway Island for about 14 months. Then when I got my new orders, I ended up going to Vietnam. But I had to go to down to San Diego to the Marine camp
Yeah.
where we went through. I'm trying to think of it.
Pendleton.
Camp Pendleton. We went through infantry training there. I
What was
spent
that
about
like?
6 weeks there.
So, okay. And I'm so curious about this, Rich. The Marines train you in essentially a kind of a Marine boot camp for 6 weeks,
Basically, it was just for infantry training.
and they scream at you like they do recruits,
Yeah.
and you learn how to fire weapons and
Yep.
do all the
Yep.
stuff Marines do.
Yep. Actually, I was an E4 by the time I was going through that. So, but finished that up and had my orders to go to Vietnam, and then processing my orders while I was in Pendleton. I think we went to Long Beach and went and checked the Navy office there because I was already had my tests in for E5. So I passed, but they said they wouldn't get it until I went to Vietnam was when my actual date of getting E5. So I went to Vietnam and was an E5
What was
in 2 years.
what was your first impression when you landed in Vietnam?
What the hell am I doing in this smelly, hot, ugly place? Because
Were you-
it stunk.
And where did you? Yes, that's
Da Nang.
Da Nang. So you landed in Da Nang. Were you assigned then?
I was
After-
assigned, my base was Da Nang. My main base was I Corps, all of I Corps,
You traveled around.
from Chulai up. But my main base, I stayed a lot of times in Da Nang area, out to Red Beach with the Marine, run around Da Nang with the Marine bases, taking care of them. And when they needed parts or something broke down or they got hit pretty bad and needed repaired, then we jumped into trucks or either took Hueys to go to the bases and get them back online.
So each day was different.
I can't say each day, but when I was in Da Nang, I took a truck out, me and two other SeaBees, and we had I'd say about maybe a 5-man team of Korean veterans that were electricians, and we had orders on our paper, go out to say Freedom Beach, out to the Marine base out there. I think it was the 3rd Marines, and go to such and such camp. I can't remember all the camp names. And they needed a power pole hood here, power up to this hooch. Just wherever they needed electricity, we were there putting it in.
Was it? I asked dumb questions. You know me, Rich. Was it dangerous?
Yeah, I was out there in the fighting.
How aware were you of the danger? I mean, were you scared? I guess I should say.
Scared or stupid?
Yeah.
Who could really, you don't think about it. You're 19 years old. Well, let's see. When I got to Vietnam, I was actually 20 years old. I turned 21 in Vietnam.
Hmm.
And I remember I was in Da Nang, back into boot camp, or back into our base in the club. We were drinking, celebrating my SeaBees. Next thing I know, I was pretty well toasted, and we were in the bunkers because we were getting mortared in.
Wow.
And rockets coming in. So we were in there.
That's how you celebrated your 21st birthday.
Yep. In a foxhole.
Boy, oh boy.
But-
What was it like then to come home? And how long did you stay in the Navy after you returned?
When I returned from Vietnam, I spent there February 17th until November 30th of 69. They gave me 3 months extra because I signed up for extra duty. Because my brother was getting drafted, and that's when they were doing the new draftee. If you were born at the end of the year, you weren't going to get drafted.
Right.
Because January 1st, you were number 1. January 2nd, and he was born February 3rd. So, he was already in the 200s. They'd have to get the 200s close to 300 before he would even get attempted to. But that's when they were putting the change on. And I says, if I extend myself, all he has to say, I have a brother in Vietnam, I don't want to go. Because at that time, they had the option, ever since the Sullivans all got killed in World War II.
Yeah.
That's when they said 2 brothers will not be in a fighting zone. So they had the option, either go ahead or they can stay out.
Rich, looking back now,
Mhm.
55 years later, are you glad you did it?
Oh yeah. Yep. I have no qualms about joining, no qualms about doing what I did. Nothing. It's what I did. And at that time, I was proud. I was proud when I came home.
Okay, you're proud when you came home. Why then did your daughter not know anything about your service?
Because I didn't tell anybody.
Why not?
Some of the things I did, I just didn't want to discuss.
Didn't anybody ever ask you about it?
Yeah. And I told them the same thing. I said, I was in the service, spent 2 years in Vietnam, spent a year on Midway Island, year in training, 4 years I was done and I got out.
That's quite an adventure for a young person. And I mean that broadly, not like I'm not saying an adventure is always a good thing.
Hmm.
Adventures can be, scary
Yeah.
or perilous. But to spend a year and 14 months at Midway, which is a whole experience in and of itself, and then going to Vietnam and then coming back, and you're still so young, you're still 21 years old.
Well, I was, let's see, 22 when I got back. So I
Okay.
turned 21. Yeah, I was 22.
Did the training that you received as a CB serve you in your civilian life?
I guess it did. Because I was going to be an electrician
Okay.
with the union down here in Beaver.
Right.
I went through all the training and all that, and not the training, but the not scholarships, but the medicals. Did that all up to talking to the officers on the board for the apprenticeship. And they looked at me and talked to me, and they said, okay, everything's here. They said, the only thing you have to do is get your hair cut and cut your mustache shorter. I says, for what?
Are you serious?
Yep. I says, for what? He said, well, we like our ears, be trimmed back. I said, no mustaches below the lip. Because I had, like not a drove full CB. 22. Didn't have really. They said, you got to cut it, nothing below your lip. I said, well, you don't want me. They said, what do you mean? I said, listen, I got 3 years of high school being an electrician, doing everything from wiring cables and motors and households and all that. I said, I got 4 years in the service with an A school of high tension wire and doing interior wiring. I says, I think I know a lot more than what the people you're already trying to just teach out of high school. I said, you're going to tell me I couldn't go to eat at, I'm trying to think, Burl Chevrolet. I couldn't eat at K&N and Ambridge. There was a couple other places. I think Sandy's and Northern Lights, all because they were built by non-union electricians.
Oh,
You were not allowed. They actually would put pickup signs, and if you were in their union and went into one, they'd kick you out.
and here's another dumb question, and then I want to get to George Mills outed himself as a CB. Thank you, George. Here's a dumb question. Did you get any kind of certification? You go through that long training, electrical training in the Navy. Did it translate into civilian life? Were you able to get the certification you needed to be a certified electrician?
It did, as far as me personally. I came back, I knew how to do interior wiring and all that. But as far as actually being an electrician, it didn't help me because nobody wanted, the little long hair, the mustache. And
Yeah.
they just didn't want it. So I went and worked in J&L. I went back where I first started out of high school, went back to J&L.
Wow.
And then they started putzing around. That's when they were starting to, fall away. And I ended up going to school.
Thank you, Rich. Rich, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, appreciate it. No problem.
Larry Googans, thank you so much for recruiting Rich for this program. I hope you'll hang on
Sure.
and interact with some of these fellow CBs. George, how are you?
I am doing well, thank you.
I don't think I've met you before. I'm Todd. Thank you. Although I'm labeled, I see, as Sean Hall. My name is not Sean. It's Todd. It's Todd.
Okay. Well,
And and you are a CB.
yes, sir.
How did you end up in the CVs?
Well, there's a little bit of a funny story about that. I was from Philadelphia, went to boot camp, filled out what was called the dream sheet, where you want to go. And I wound up at Philadelphia Navy Base as a seaman apprentice. And what most people don't know is during the period that the New Jersey was being refitted on Pier 4 in Philadelphia, there was one destroyer that was running radar 24/7, and there was another destroyer running sonar 24/7, protecting the Delaware River. as it passes through Philadelphia. I happened to be on the one that was doing the sonar, but I was maintenance on the sonar bar, which had good points and bad points. I could do the maintenance when the sonar was off, but the minute I heard the first beep, I was allowed to scramble out through the boatswain's locker and just go waste CO2 bottles for a while. So I did the old, I got to get out of this place.
Okay, right. And I've heard of other Seabees did the same thing. They wanted to get out of that, right, scraping and painting.
So what happened is on board ship, they didn't care. So I got a little antsy and was turned over to base personnel. And they said, what else do you want to do? And I said, well, I might want to do this. And they said, not available to you. And I said, I might want to do that. And they said, not available to you. And when we got to the bottom of the pile, it was, okay, what can you do for me? And they said, did you ever hear of the SeaBees?
And you said, sign me up.
And I said, oh, okay. Tell me about them. And it was really, what can I do when I get out as a hobby, or what can I pick up?
Yeah.
I'll just suffer through the rest of my enlistment, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it, is they said, well, you got to, all SeaBees are volunteers. So first you have to sign a chit that says, I volunteer for CB duty. No problem. And then the second one they slid in front of me was like, I volunteer for combat duty. And I went, whoa, dude, I dropped out of college and enlisted in Navy, so I didn't get drafted and go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I was pretty frustrated with the whole thing. So I said, what the hell? They don't all go, just most of them, And with that, I was off to Davisville, Rhode Island for what became a really nice ride.
And what was your training in? I mean, your, skill trades
I was
training.
trained as a builder.
Okay.
And in the Navy, a Navy builder does waterfront construction, concrete and mortar, and wood framing, wood housing, wood buildings. So it's the three different ones. And then I had a little bit of a problem with that. I did a pretty good job at school. And then when I went through combat training, I did a pretty good job at combat training. So then I was given SERE school, SERE.
Yes.
And then I was sent to places that had no names for further training. And then I was assigned to a battalion. And I dispatched to Vietnam with the battalion. But we no sooner landed, and I went, this is where I come when I'm not out in the field.
And what was the number of your battalion?
7.
7. Okay.
7.
And where did you go? It sounds like you were everywhere.
Well, the last guy mentioned I Corps. I pretty much was everywhere in I Corps you could go. But I did most of it, surprisingly, as a one-man detachment.
One man attached to Marines?
Arvins.
To Arvins, really?
Yes, I was embedded with the Arvins under MACV SOG.
Whoa. Well, that's a whole different level.
And I'll make the story quick, and it's 100% true. I'll tell you who our customer was. The guys with the silver Hueys.
CIA.
No, I only knew them as Air America.
Okay. Okay.
I did not know the other part till after I got home.
And SOG Studies and Observations Group, they did lots of clandestine operations, right?
Yep.
Very dangerous stuff out in the boonies for a long time. And you accompanied them.
Well, I did not do it with the U.S. troops. I did it with the Vietnamese
With
troops.
just the Vietnamese. Did you trust them?
Well, it's an interesting story that goes further. Is the colonel of the Vietnamese Army unit had said to me when we would get hit at night, don't take the line. Come to the command bunker. I said, no, man, I can shoot the eyes out of a net. And his answer was no. He says, I think about a third of our cadre are VC.
That's what the colonel said.
That's what he said. He says, I think a third of our cadre are VC. It was fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast, George. Oh my gosh.
So I did that as a CB. Then I did have a reward. Somebody here mentioned 1st Marine Air Wing. Is between assignments, I was back in base camp and had nothing to do, so wound up building a custom hooch for the commanding general of the 1st Marine Air Wing.
Oh, wow.
It was 5 sea huts rearranged, ordered 5 sea huts of lumber from Da Nang,
Jeez.
and we arranged them on site to be what I would call a Malibu over the water hangout.
That sounds
Got me
absolutely
3
wonderful.
steaks every time I was back in base camp.
Oh, yeah, I remember them days.
So I'll ask what I asked Rich coming back home. What was that like?
I was in Vietnam on Tuesday and I was visiting my girlfriend on Thursday.
Just like Clem Blazewick has said the same thing, that one day he's in Vietnam, next day he's walking around the streets of Oakland. Yeah, bizarre. Did people ask you about your service? Did you talk about it much?
On the Vietnam, on Operation CB Knowledge, which was a website,
Yes.
there's a story by a novelist called The Sharp End of the Spear. That site has since gone dark, but The Sharp End of the Spear was my story.
Okay.
Joe Buff used me.
So sharp end of the spear was it spoke for you, or did you say you wrote it?
No, well, is Joe and another guy named Normand interviewed me
Okay, interviewed you.
for it
Okay.
because Joe Buff, the author, was looking for background information because although his novels are about the fleet, he always buries a CB in every novel, one, as a token to his father.
And that gets at whenever I talk with veterans all the time, and I've been doing it for 17 years, and I'm always, if I see a Navy veteran, I will introduce myself, I'll ask them, and I'll often say my question will be, and this must drive you crazy, were you on a ship? I'll ask. And over 17 years I've learned, of course, many sailors are not on ships. But at first, when I first started interviewing vets, I was so perplexed. Who were these guys? Who were these guys? Why were they wearing Marine caps or covers? Sorry about that, Colonel Washington. And these guys who, and what were these CBs? And it was perplexing to me. But I imagine that a lot of people probably had those questions too when you came home and told people you were in the Navy and then told them what you did and had a hard time squaring that.
But the battalion that I was with, traveled over with, and then came home from was 500 strong, I'd say, give or take.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think I'd have to go look, but I think there were something like 8 or 9 battalions at a time.
Yeah.
Scattered throughout Vietnam.
Right. Yeah. You guys were busy. In fact,
1 battalions, and they would just rotate. You basically sold all your gear to the next guy.
and I've when we've done trips to Vietnam, and younger people that we've run into have specifically mentioned the Seabees, that they're grateful to the Seabees for building this, building that, building this road, dredging this port. The Vietnamese seem very aware that a lot of the infrastructure still being used today was built first by Seabees.
Well, that's true, and part of it goes back to the early slide into what was called Vietnamization. The Seabees always did what was called civic action, And then they put together civic action teams during Vietnam. And then there would be detachments assembled of guys that were kind of between real work jobs. And they'd go out and they'd put a new roof on a hospital or whatever. So, and the Vietnamese basically gave everyone who participated in that a medal. Civic, what was it? Vietnam Civic Actions Medal.
Vietnam Civic Action. So in other words, part of your mission, part of the CB mission in Vietnam was supporting the civilian, winning hearts and minds.
Winning hearts and minds is exactly, I was searching for a sequence of words that would really describe it. And that was it, is we're really good guys as Americans.
Yeah.
The doc would go along and he'd give out shots. The dentist would go out and do teeth work.
You know,
The
George,
battalion was a full self-serving battalion. We had mess cooks, regular Navy mess cooks. We had doctors. We had dentists. We had everything that a regular Navy unit would have within the SeaBees. There were 7 trade rates, but
yes,
there were probably 20 odd what others call MOSs. You know, like the pay clerk was a fleet sailor,
right. But supporting the CBs, right,
but he got to wear green fatigues when he was in Vietnam.
right, right. You know, we have somewhere in my notes from breakfast probably 6 or 7 years ago, CB stood up, and I have his story recorded because I thought it was so compelling. He said he was at a base I-Corps CB, and he said, you know, we never got mortared, we never got shelled. The artillery always went over our heads, you know, to hit the Marines who were behind us. We were pretty front line, but we were never bothered for some reason. He said, and then one night, an artillery shell exploded and killed some CBs, you know, wounded some CBs, scared a lot of us. And he said, wouldn't you know, like the very next night or two, Hanoi Hannah gets on the radio and apologizes to the CB battalion that we did not mean to strike you because we will enjoy everything you build after you leave. So keep on building. We don't want to hurt you. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a fascinating story. I'd never heard any story like that. But I think that speaks to the hearts and minds kind of work that you were doing. George, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
I have a feeling we have other CBs here on the program.
Welcome home, George.
Yeah,
Thank
welcome
you.
home,
Welcome
George.
home to you too.
I'm going to ask Sean, could you once again, my computer, I'm not able to unmute people. Sean, if you could unmute
Bob Fleisch.
Bob Fleisch, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello,
There you go, Bob.
Bob. How are things in sunny Florida?
Yes, well, it's not so sunny today, but one thing that you had mentioned, the Navy was not recruiting or was not training skilled positions in the CBs when they first started because they were tapping on the CCC workers that had been trained and even I call it materialized training, you know, order and all that type of stuff with the CCC. My grandfather was the CC camp commander, and he told me that, you know, the skills that these guys had there were definitely valuable to the CBs coming in. They built the Alaska Road and, you know, different things. So like I said, they really backed us up at that point in time. But the other thing is, you were saying that the CBs are out front. Yes, they were out grading the airfields while the Marines were out getting shot at. I mean, you know, on EWO, these guys they had graded the first airfield before. Well, I guess the mountain was captured, but they were still working at the other end of it. And I'm sure they were catching some stray rounds coming that way. So, you know, they've got to be, they're credited for that type of behavior.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, they're building under fire and firing back. I agree with that, Bob. I have great admiration for Seabees. Did Seabees get uh, extra pay just for being a CB? I know that there was bonus
No,
pay. George, no?
no.
No,
When you
Okinawa.
went to
Yes, you did.
Vietnam, you
Yes,
did.
you did. You got $1 a day.
Yeah.
It was
You
a $1 a day per diem
You got $1 a day. Was that for being in Vietnam or for being a CB?
being in Vietnam.
Oh, okay. So nothing special. You don't get an extra pay.
No.
There was no combat pay. No.
I got hazardous duty pay, $50 a month.
Hazardous duty pay,
Hmm.
$50 a month. Is that in addition to
My regular pay, Navy
your regular
yeah.
pay? Okay. Just while you're in Vietnam.
Just while I was in Vietnam.
Okay. Chris Perollo, another sailor. How are you, Chris?
Good evening, everybody, and gentlemen. Good to hear your stories there. Navy guy here. I wanted to expound on a couple of things that were said here. The Seabees. I don't want to overuse the word here, but they are an elite group of people within the Navy. I mean, this is a core of really special guys there. There is no shortage of people wanting to get into the Seabees right now. It is what I guess civilian term would be, it is a seller's market when you go into the recruiter. But that means you have to wait. You have to wait for a billet to open up before you can even go to boot camp and on to A school. So they are alive and well and very strong to this day. Rich mentioned, I think Rich mentioned his uncle was a CB.
Yes, sir.
Very good. I've
Two
never
uncles.
met his two uncles. Very good. It's been my experience that every CB I know, including one of my best friends in boot camp, was either going into the Seabees because they had a father, uncle, or cousin who had been in the Seabees. So they were like a legacy and they were following in those footsteps and proud to do so. George, I read your comment there about baby blue stripes. And
when
I want-
Richard
no.
said that he was a construction apprentice, not a seaman apprentice, I said, "Yep,
right.
baby
This
blue."
this is normal. This is normal seaman stripes. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
There are only 4 colors of these stripes allowed in the Navy. Your firemen, which are your boiler techs and propulsion people, your medical people, dental technicians, and medics. They are blue. No, I'm sorry. Seabees are blue.
Seabees are baby blue.
Oh, okay. Green. Then the medic guys are green, I believe. And then there's the regular seaman stripes. I know there's green, but the seamen are baby blue. And if you're on a military base and you see a guy with either apprentice or seaman stripes there and they're blue, you know exactly who he is.
That's right.
You know exactly who he is. And I don't know what I didn't look up the tradition of the colors there, but you can tell if the Navy's going to go to that trouble to do that, then they recognize the Seabees as something special. And the third point I wanted to make is when the Navy Times was a really good source of information, and that was years ago, they would publish a legend that showed you where forces every week, where naval forces were all over the world. And used to astonish me at how many CB units were in South America, Asia, Africa, all over the world doing some kind of project, even countries I didn't think liked us. But it told me that they were being employed for hearts and minds projects everywhere because you could mobilize them easy. I'm going to assume you can mobilize them easy, get them in and out of there. You didn't need a very, very large infrastructure to support them. Yet if they leave a school building or a church or whatever they build, a road, whatever they're building there, they leave that behind. That's a lasting legacy and infrastructure that people remember. Just as I think we had an example of that here. So definitely, gentlemen, be proud of that and respect very much the Seabees what they do for the naval service there. That's it. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and a projection of soft power, I
Yes,
think,
yes.
is kind of what you're getting at. Thank you
And
very, Chris.
I'm pretty sure they're still doing that today, although Navy Times won't tell you anymore.
Chris, it's always wonderful having you on. Not only are you a Navy veteran, career Navy veteran, but also such an eloquent historian of Navy history. So thank you very much. Rosemary Schwobel, Rosemary Thunder Schwobel, was a donut dolly in Vietnam. And we also have Nancy Smoyer, Renee Johnson, who were donut dollies in Vietnam, who no doubt got a meal or two from Seabees. Sean, could you please ask Rosemary to unmute? Her father was Ivan Thunder, who wrote a memoir of his World War II service. He was an officer in the Seabees, correct?
Right. He was a lieutenant.
And he was on Iwo
Yeah, and he landed on the second day. They weren't supposed to land that quickly. As you know, they were there to build, but something got mixed up, and he landed very early. They were building the runway that was needed for the what's the name of the plane that bombed Hiroshima?
B-29s.
That's
The Enola
why
Gay.
they were building the runway so that there'd be somewhere intermittent there to land.
Right. Right.
And my nephew was on, Chris Thunder.
Chris
just
Thunder, yes.
Yeah,
What does it say? I'm sorry, Rosemary.
it just says Thunder.
Got
And
it.
I just he's in the Army. He's a helicopter pilot.
Oh, great. Yeah, let's get him unmuted and talking. And Rosemary, I have to say, I think we've gone back and forth with Jim, your brother, about perhaps running an excerpt from your father's memoir, either on our website or in our magazine or something
Good,
like that.
good.
So
Yeah.
we'd love to do that. Yes. Chris.
I've asked him to unmute, but he has not. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Hey, Thunder.
I guess I need to update that.
You have the best last name, I swear.
It gets us in just as much trouble as it gets us out of. So
Yeah, it probably does. You're right. Tell me, you've read your grandfather's book.
yeah, I was one of the people who actually helped edit it.
Oh, wow. Did you work with your grandfather on it then?
No, I did not. No,
Okay, but you took it and edited it.
I read portions of it before he handed off to my Aunt Rosemary to do the majority of the actual heavy lifting, editing, and proofreading.
And what did you know about his service growing up?
Just as what little he spoke about. It wasn't until I enlisted initially before I went into aviation. I went into construction engineer battalion in the Army. And so once he found that out, we started talking a lot more about his service and my service and the comparison between the Army Reserve construction battalions, the engineering command, and his service as a CB.
What a great way to connect with your grandfather.
Yeah, it was really good.
Oh, that must have been so great.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. George, yes.
If his grandfather was in MSCB 133, they were in the order of battle in the landing crafts with the Marines.
Yeah.
Back. And members of MCB 133, most of which have naturally passed and moved on, where the Marines that landed on Iwo were given the Presidential Unit Citation. Those Seabees never were.
Yeah, actually, in the tail end of my grandfather's book, there was a petition that was put in there because of the loss of casualties that they had, and a lot of the merits that they were doing with that. My grandfather specifically with an LST, they were trying to get them to get a Presidential Unit Citation.
Well, the PUC has been approved. 4 MCB 133 participants, but only in the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
My dad died in 2010. He was 97 years old.
Hmm.
And he finished his book just 2 weeks before he died.
Oh boy. I'm so glad he did. I'm so glad you encouraged him and you worked with him on it.
And the interesting thing is that we've contacted several times the what used to be called the Nimitz Museum in Texas, and they have no books on their website or in their museum bookstore that deal with Iwo Jima and the SeaBees. None. Zip. And his is a memoir. And I don't know why they won't carry his book. One reason might be because it's self-published by Amazon. There seems to be a big prejudice in the book world.
Can you tell me,
against-
Rosemary, what museum this is again?
It's the Pacific War Museum.
Okay. Yeah, Pacific
It
War Museum.
changed
Fredericksburg,
names.
Texas.
Yep. Okay.
It's
right.
it used to be called the Nimitz Museum about, I don't know, 10 years ago or so.
Oh, it's a wonderful museum, and it
Oh,
absolutely
they
should.
they renovated it wonderfully. I've been there 2 or 3 times.
And have you talked to the bookstore people there about
Oh
your
yeah.
father's book?
Oh yeah.
And what do they say? No?
No, they won't say no. They just won't do anything about it. Oh, there's one woman I contacted or I reached recently, and she was all excited about getting the book in there. And I think I sent them a book. I sent them a copy. Yeah. And then I called to follow up, and she was no longer there.
Aha. Rosemary, I'd like to look into that for you because that book should be on the shelf.
That would be great if
Okay.
somebody else could do that. I've tried.
Okay.
I've tried since since it was published in 2012.
Because it really is a matter of getting to just the right person.
And we do have his plaque there. His plaque is on there.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I want to invite people to ask questions. We probably have other SeaBees on this program or people who are related to SeaBees. Rosemary, when you were in Vietnam, did you go to SeaBee camps?
No, I didn't. I was never on the coast. But when we were in Phu Bai, we went somewhere. When we went to the beach on Sundays, we took advantage of the Navy. I don't know if they were SeaBees, but the Navy had play equipment like a boat and water skis and surfboards. Although there was no surf really, but they had surfboards. So that's my only connection to SeaBees there.
Renee Johnson, you were a Donut Dolly in Vietnam. Did you entertain SeaBees?
We didn't entertain them. They entertained us.
How so?
Seriously, we had gotten to know some at Chulai because we needed some repairs on our quarters that the Army wasn't getting around to doing. And somebody suggested we contact the SeaBees, so we did. And then we were invited down to eat with them a couple of times. And being Navy, they had much better food than the Army did. And ironically, just the other day, I was going through this big plastic bin of some of the souvenirs left over from Vietnam. And I'm in the process of purging a lot of stuff because there's no place for it. But I found an invitation, and I don't know if I kept it and just threw it back in this bin or not, but from the SeaBees at Chulai. And I'm pretty sure, as George asked earlier, that they were first MAW, Marine Air Wing.
Okay.
That invited us down to eat with them one time. And they were just really great guys. They were so different from anybody else in the military.
How so? How so? We want to hear about that.
So
How were they different?
well, first of all, even though they did have their combat training, they weren't fighting soldiers. And I happened to just be stationed with 2 infantry divisions during my tour over there, first tour over there. So that was, what I related to the most. And they were gentlemen at all times. They were very helpful. Everybody was willing to go out of their way to help us, but they not only were willing, but they had the equipment and the skilled training to do it, to
Yeah.
actually get things done. So, they were just really kind of neat guys. And that was, in my whole life, that was my only firsthand experience with them.
And I've
Because
had
next place I was at Kuchi.
Kuchi.
So, no CBs in
So no
Kuchi.
CBs there. How about you, Nancy Smoyer? If you could, Sean, if you could unmute Nancy or ask her to unmute.
Got it.
Afraid, oh, am I on? Yes. I'm afraid I don't have any good stories about the Seabees. I just know they had their base camp, or I don't know how major it was, next to Freedom Hill in Da Nang.
Yep.
And so they would come to the recreation center, but that's, I'm afraid, all I remember. I could make something
Camp
up, but
Kinshaw was their base.
Camp Kinshaw.
okay.
I'm going off. I want to go to Bill Confer in a second here, but I'm thinking through the kind of stereotypes about CBs that I've run across over the years in my, reading and encountering. Number one, especially from World War II, they were gamblers.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Gamblers.
Oh, yeah.
And number two, they were traders. They always had something. They could always get you something, what you needed, and you could trade with them, right, for things. That's what I remember.
Well, basically, they stole and then traded.
I was trying to be nice about this, George. Yeah, they were kind of operators.
Oh, yes.
And number three, I guess they were kind of not very formal. They didn't have reputations for being formal military. They were more informal kind of people, and they were able to move around, on their own. They had kind of more autonomy, I guess, than other soldiers and sailors or Marines had. Bill Confer, what's your memory of CBs?
Well, I just had a funny one. We worked, 25 miles northwest of Saigon, and one day at the end of the day when we finished our flight, we heard that there was a CB down just south of Saigon, and he wanted to see Saigon from the air. So he promised us some good food. And so we went down, picked him up, took him for a ride around Saigon. And after we were all done, he threw a case of steaks in the aircraft for us, and we headed back home. So that was the extent of my interaction with them. We knew they had good food. So
they had good food. Yes, they always had good food.
And we never had steaks except for when we got them from the Air Force or the Navy like that. We had what we called mystery meat. So I think it was like water buffalo or something.
We have a great CB, Vietnam CB, who lives near me here in Pittsburgh, comes to our breakfast in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, who tells the story of, he was a pipe fitter, he did like water pipes. And he just remembered, he said, the Viet Cong would put a hole in the water pipe like every night, and he would fix it. And a Buddhist monk came down and said, you know what, if you extend it to our monastery, I'll take care of the hole that you get every night. And that was it. That was the deal that he was able to strike. So that was it was a kind of a twofer there. You get winning the hearts and minds and dealing with this annoying problem. Jim Roberts, you were at Dong Shuai. You were not a CB, you were Army advisor, MAT team advisor. And your base at Dong Shuai pretty darn remote, northwest or north of Saigon, was built by Seabees in 1965. Sean, if you could ask Jim to unmute.
It was right. It was Special Forces A team, and they had a force of what they called CIDG, Civilian Irregular Defense Group, and they had RF soldiers and Montagnards, and the Seabees came in to build a base for them. I think there were 9 Seabees in, and they'd been there a couple of days when they were hit by 1,500 NVA.
1,500 NVA.
Right. There were basically 11 Green Berets and 9 Seabees and several hundred Vietnamese and Montagnards.
Jim, I think it wasn't NVA. I think it was regular force Viet Cong.
You read different things, Todd. I was reading several different reports today, and some said regular force Viet Cong and some said NVA. So
really, I need
it's hard to get a real crystal solid story about what went on there. I've heard some things I can't verify. I tried to put a couple things in the book, but I couldn't back them up, so I pulled them out.
And I just want to emphasize, I think this is an important detail. For me as a historian, I'm very curious about the roles of the Viet Cong and the roles of the NVA that we often conflate, but they're two very different, very different fighting units. But the Viet Cong had large force, full-time, well-equipped, well-trained units that would attack in large numbers very early in the war. They stopped doing that. But this attack was June 10th, 1965. So
there were actually 3 attacks.
3 attacks.
The Viet Cong set up an ambush force at Tuan Loy in an open field. They set another ambush force up at Tuan Loy, which is a rubber plantation a couple miles north of Dong Xoai, on the airstrip. And they figured that when they hit Dong Xoai, that the ARVNs would fly in the relief column to the soccer field at Tuan Loy, and they wiped out the unit. Then when they started flying them into the airfield, they were ambushed there again. Wow. And so they set this up in a real interesting way while they were maintaining the attack on the village of Dong Xoai and the camp at Dong Xoai. So it was a well-planned, well-orchestrated effort on their part with a lot of soldiers. And they lost a lot of people, and the ARVN lost a lot of troops too, as well as RF soldiers and Montagnards.
And we're bringing this up because one of the Americans who died in that battle was Marvin Shields, who I believe is the only Navy SeaBee Medal of Honor. Correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And so Marvin Shields was killed where you were in Dong Xoai in 1965. Can you tell us a little bit about what he did?
Basically, the camp was reduced in heavy number. They had been shoved out of the Special Forces side of the compound. They were in the district side of the compound, and they were being chewed up. Shields had been wounded at least twice. The captain in charge of the A team had been seriously wounded, was out of action. The Lieutenant Quarles had received command. He had been wounded 3 times. They were being hammered by a 30 caliber machine gun, which was about to wipe them out. So he asked for a volunteer to help him go with a rocket launcher and a shell to take out the machine gun. They were able to do that, but in firing the rocket, they exposed their position, so they had to retreat. They were both wounded again on the retreat. After some hours, when they finally got a helicopter in, they medevac Shields and Quarles, and Shields died on the medevac on the way out.
Oh my!
And so Quarles, I think, moved to Ohio and he died a few years ago. He stayed in, and so to my knowledge, Marvin Shields is the only SeaBee that won the Medal of Honor, and it was a brutal war. It was a brutal battle.
A brutal battle, yes. George or Rich, do you want to chime in here about Marvin Shields?
No, there's not too much. The only thing I know about, he was the only SeaBee to get the Medal of Honor in Vietnam.
Right. And I think the only ever.
Yeah.
Is that correct? I think the only ever. Which seems improbable to me, but must be.
Well, there's an old war story that goes hand in hand. SeaBees always get 1 medal less than they earn.
Well, the story with Shields was since he wasn't a combat soldier, he was carrying ammunition to to the special forces units at their fighting positions. He was helping carrying wounded back to where they could be tended. He kept exposing himself to fire over and over again in bringing ammunition and helping the wounded. And then he went on his final mission with the lieutenant to blow the machine gun away.
And it's saved many lives in doing so.
Yes.
Well, Shields was a construction mechanic by trade.
Yeah, construction mechanic. Right.
But he was also part of what was called the CB team. It was 9 people specifically trained to work together to do insertion jobs for anybody that needed it, whether it was special forces or the local mayor or the local governor. They would insert themselves, do their job, and then they'd chuck off to the next place.
Now, I will say this: after the battle and the camp had been retaken, the CBs came in and built one hell of an outfit, one hell of a camp. I mean, my tour was as good as it was because I was there. I mean, the bunker we had basically had 5 feet of overhead cover, 3 feet of overhead cover, layers of PSP sandbags, Air Force transport pallets, concrete. We found 2 wires on the switchboard which said Doomsday. We had no idea what that was for, but we didn't hook a battery up to it to find out. We dropped something. We dropped something heavy on one of the steps going to the bunker, and it broke a piece of concrete, and it was det cord running through the concrete. And so they just built an incredible place after that attack. Then they disappeared. They never came back.
Never came back. That is so neat. Hey, I want to let Sean know. Sean, I can't scroll through. I can't see the chat anymore. And I can't unmute and mute, and I can't share my screen. I had a picture of Marvin Shields I wanted to show. Wonderful photos of Dong Shuai that Jim shared with me that I can't show, unfortunately. I want to say hi to Ernest Linneman. I don't believe I've met you before. I notice you here. Feel free to unmute and introduce yourself. Maybe you're a closet CB, and if so, you can let us know. Renee, yes, could you unmute Renee, please, Sean?
Yes, and Ernst is unmuted as well.
Okay.
Sean, I'm ex-Air Force.
Hey, well, let's go to Ernst. Ernst, how are you?
Good, thank you. But I'm old school. I'm before Vietnam. I'm 1957 to 62.
And you're a CB?
No. Air Force.
Oh, you're Air Force. Okay.
Yeah, we were Air Force flight facilities repairman. In other words, we'd fix all the navigation systems for the aircraft, not all the ground stations. Usually on it, but I was also stationed. I wasn't stationed in Vietnam. I was stationed in Alaska, and that was kind of boaty also. But it was a lot of fun. We had no danger, but it was cold but neat stuff.
What was the air base?
Well, I was stationed out of Ladd Air Force Base, which has been closed now. Eielson replaced it, but I was stationed what they call remote. We were running TACAN facilities up in Northway, Alaska, or down in Northway, Alaska, and up in Battle, Alaska.
Well, thank you for joining us, Ernst. I hope you'll join us again and share more.
Well, we'll try, yeah. But the CBs looked interesting. That's why I thought I'd tune in.
Yeah. So, and what is the equivalent? What's the Air Force equivalent of the CB's Black Horse?
Red Horse.
Red Horse.
Yeah. I never needed them. We always built our own equipment. We didn't build the building, but we would furnish all the electronics. But it was the AACS in those days, Air and Airways Communication Service.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a plaque behind me, right over my head. I don't know if you can see it.
I do see a plaque. Yes.
Yeah, that's Air Force AACS. We used to call ourselves. You then became Air Combat Command in '62.
Well, that raises we have a veterans open conversation coming up a week from today, March 10th, 7 p.m. Where we talk about veterans share stories. We just have there's no agenda. Maybe if you could join us then, that would be wonderful, Ernst.
Oh, well, I read your notices. It sounds interesting usually, and if I have the time.
Okay.
I'm in the Seattle market here, though. I'm on Western time.
So it's like way early there.
Yeah,
but if you can, we'd love to. And I just want to let people know I can't share my screen. I usually show our upcoming programs, but a week from today, we'll have open conversation. This is where we simply kind of open it up to stories or discussions or debates that anybody wants to have, any issues you want to bring up. It's often helpful if you email me or Sean ahead of time and let us know what you want to talk about. So this is our open conversation that we have coming up a week from tonight. And we also have another program that I really want to highlight coming up Thursday night. This is Thursday, March 6th. We're having George Rubin on. George Rubin is I think he's a 99-year-old B-17 tail gunner who was shot down in February 1945, taken POW, and he's going to share his story. Very vigorous, wonderful storyteller. He's going to share his story with us on Thursday night. And what fascinates me about George is, and I think Bob von Bargen shares this fascination, is that George Rubin, Jewish name, he was Jewish. I'm curious to know whether that impacted his experience in World War II, but he came home and converted to Quakerism and became a pacifist. And he talks about his pacifism, and I'll be interested to having him share that story. So that is Thursday night, 7 p.m. Glenn Flickinger will be the host. I hope you'll join us. Renee Johnson, how are you?
I'm so good. This is not about SeaBees. This is about women in response to Brad's comment at the very beginning of the program. And I don't know if you saw my message up there, but the other night I saw a movie on PBS. I had to stream it about the women of World War II, the untold heroes. And I'd never seen this before. And a lot of the footage was probably filmed quite some time ago, judging by the age of the women. But it includes the original footage from the 6th 888 Battalion. It concludes with WASP. It's an excellent program. So any of you guys and women who are interested in women's history, I recommend you try to find that either on your local station or on pbs.org if you're a member, because it was really, really interesting. And what I found especially fascinating was that the author of the book on which this was based, mother was a donut dolly in World War II.
And what is the title of the documentary again?
The documentary is The Women of World War II, The Untold Heroes.
Got it.
The book is, I believe it's Women at War by Emily Yellin, Yellin.
And I believe Jim Jameson read that book and highly recommends it. I'm not sure if that was the same book you read, Jim, that you very much recommended that I read. Thought it was great.
There was a book on women. I'll look that up. I'll have it for Monday night.
Okay. Thank you. Sean Hall.
Todd, just to say to the SeaBees that joined us tonight, if they want more details of their records, what I got back on my dad as SeaBee records from the military in St. Louis really told a complete story. And if they're missing bits and pieces, it may help refresh their memory.
Okay. So in other words, order your records from the National Archives.
Right. It takes about 3 months after you sign the paper.
Right. And we have on our blog, we have how to do that. And Beth Russell, one of our members here, is a true military records research expert who can help with that.
Yeah,
Thank you. And I also want to emphasize, if you don't get our magazine, it's because we don't have your address. We publish a quarterly magazine where we get stories. We publish the stories that we hear at our events. It comes out every quarter. Let us know your address. We'll be happy to send it to you every quarter. It's free of charge. So yeah, please do. And also, if we don't have your email, let us know so that we can keep you up to date on our schedule. Sean, you were going to say something?
I just wanted to highlight Susan Yu in the room as well. Her friend is a Navy SeaBee and has a book out.
Oh, yes. Susan,
Yes.
How are you?
Hi, how are you? Actually, he's not a SeaBee, he's a historian. So I was, I guess I sent, just out of the blue, we had done a tour of the Northern Mariana Islands in Japan last year. So it was Tinian, Guam, Saipan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Osaka. And I remembered that there was a 107th SeaBee monument on Tinian. So I took some pictures and sent them to Sean, or sent them to Todd.
I have them. They were wonderful. I have them. I can't share them though.
But he can't share them.
Yeah.
But But so I thought, not that many people get over there. But my friend is Don Farrell. I guess.
And is Don Farrell with us tonight?
I bet you he's not. I was looking for him, and
I was going to say, he lives on Tinian, right?
He lives on Tinian. But
that's like 10,000 miles away.
Yeah, the name of his it would be about, I checked, it would be about 11:30 there in the morning. So
we got to get him on.
He's excellent. He's written 2 books. I guess this screensaver, you can't really see it. It's called SeaBees and Superforts at War. It's this huge book. It's like 500 pages, 518 pages. And, not only does he talk about Tinian and the SeaBees, but also Saipan. And it's like a James Michener novel. He just has the history from the very beginning. So that's really good. And since he married, I guess he was a teacher, and he ended up marrying a teacher there, and she was Chamorro. So he's, raised his family. He's been there over 40 years. And so he's also an atomic bomb expert. So I met Don when I went on Manhattan Project tour with Stephen Ambrose. So he was our historian. So there's I'll send the links to you. And
thank you so much, Susan.
Atomic Bomb Island. So I'm a serial World War II tour person. I've been on like 8 of them. So I've been covering all of them.
And we should have you on to talk about those tours. Because we know a lot of, we run tours ourselves, but we know a lot of people who are interested in travel and World War II oriented travel.
And I just have one more thing to say. When I was on Tinian, I sent you the letter, there's all these monuments to the different people that fought there, and including the 509th Composite Group, which, and that's where the Enola Gay took off. So we got to see all the sites there, but there's a group of monuments, small monuments to the people the Americans that fought there in World War II, and they just are in terrible, terrible shape. So when I got back home, I emailed a couple people from the Army. There was some general and some, sergeant and somebody in the Pacific Fleet. But they never answered me. I did the research for them. I told them this is who the people of Tinian are supposed to take care of it. But there's only 2,044 people that actually live there. There's a big Army base there.
Wow.
But we saw all these Army people like swimming and stuff. And I thought, well, maybe they could just go there and clean them up one day or something. But I never heard back from anybody. So I was just going to put out there, if anybody has any idea of anybody in the military that would, that could say, hey, this looks like an interesting project, for people to do. And there's going to be ceremonies there for the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in September. It would be nice if they were cleaned up. Like the screensaver or the background I have is for the 509th. Okay. And it lists all the different people, and it also lists Project Alberta, the people at Los Alamos, as part of this plaque.
Part of that.
So, but there was one of the, I forget what it was, but all the men that were killed were all around the sides of the monument. But there was just,
it was in disrepair.
You could hardly read them.
Right.
So I was trying to do that, and then I kind of dropped the ball. So I thought I would mention that here.
Thank you, Susan.
Has any ideas?
And Glenn and I have been talking about planning a trip, a Pacific War trip. So, and Tinian would be on one of the itineraries that we were playing around with. So
it's beautiful there. It's everybody is so nice. But one thing that I noticed was that there's a lot of poverty on Tinian and Saipan. Guam, not so much. But I just thought, you just have to learn the history of what happened to those islands. It's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And Saipan is still recovering from a 2018 typhoon. So it's just like,
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Bob Van Vargen, we're going to give you the last word here because we're over time. How are you, Bob?
Good. I just wanted to say it was so nice to see Ernst Linnemann pop up on there. Ernst was one of the founders of the Armed Forces Heritage Museum, and then he went and moved from New Jersey out to Washington to be with family. Can you imagine someone being so just horrible and do things like that?
Yeah.
Ernst Lindemann is one fine man, and boy, when you interview him, you will find that out.
That's terrific. Thank you, Bob. That's all you want to say, Bob?
That's it. My CB contact, he was busy this evening, and I'm going to try to get him for April 4th.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. That'd be terrific if we got him for April 4th.
He's a master chief, outstanding individual.
And by April 4th, you're referring to a breakfast that we're having in Bordentown, New Jersey, a Veterans Breakfast Club breakfast, April 4th. We'll look forward to that. Thank you, Bob. Hey, and thanks to all of you for joining us to commemorate, celebrate, mark the 83rd birthday of the Naval Construction Battalions. I'm very sorry that I dropped the ball with my computer issues where I can't share my screen. I am getting a new computer this week, and those problems will be all fixed. So, Sean, anything more to add?
No, thank you, everybody. We'll see you Thursday night.
Okay. And then Russell Knight is holding up Russell Knight was holding up there he is, a CB. There, CB patch. All right. See you all Thursday night. Enjoy the night.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you, Todd.
Good night, everyone.
Appreciate it. Larry, see you. Okay, good night.
See you, Rich.
Good night. Come on. Now I can't get it off. Number